The woman at the accident scene. There's a reason Mexican truck drivers never stop to help stranded motorists on La Rumorosa during the Night of the Dead. This is the true story of a man who broke that rule and now carries a warning for those who dare to interfere with death's plan. The locals call La Rumorosa the Whisperer. It's not just because of the wind that howls through the mountain passes like tortured souls. It's because of what the dead whisper to the living who travel this road alone at night. I've been hauling freight across Mexico's deadliest highway for 15 years, but nothing prepared me for what happened that October night. My name is Miguel Valdez, and this is my confession. The clock on my dashboard read 11:02 p.m. as I guided my 18-wheeler around another hairpin turn on La Rumorosa. The mountain road connecting Mexicali to Tijuana is infamous among truckers, a serpentine nightmare of 180-degree blind curves hugging sheer cliffs with no guardrails, just small reflective markers separating you from a 1,000-foot drop into darkness. I should have been home hours ago. Marisol, 7 months pregnant with our third child, had called earlier, her voice tight with worry. "Miguel, por favor, not tonight. The roads will be empty." "We need the money, mi amor," I'd insisted. "Just this last delivery, and I'll be home before sunrise." Money. Always money. The bank had threatened foreclosure on our small house in Mexicali, and hauling extra shifts was the only way to keep up with payments. But that night, as my headlights cut through the dense fog rolling off the Baja California mountains, I wondered if any amount of money was worth driving La Rumorosa on the eve of Dia de los Muertos. The radio crackled with static as I switched stations trying to find something to keep me company. Static again. I turned the dial, manually pausing when I caught a few notes of a familiar bolero, haunting and melancholic. The signal strengthened, filling the cab with a woman's voice singing about eternal love and separation. "No me dejes aquí, esperando por ti." "Don't leave me here, waiting for you." The song faded into static, replaced by a whisper so faint I wasn't sure if I'd imagined it. "Deténgase. Stop." I jabbed at the power button, silencing the radio. Just interference from the mountain, I told myself, or my exhausted mind playing tricks. I'd been on the road for 14 hours straight, sustained by black coffee and the stale empanadas I'd bought at the last truck stop. The dashboard thermometer showed the outside temperature dropping rapidly, unusual, even for late October in these mountains. 60 degrees, 55, 48. I cranked up the heater, rubbing my arms against a chill that seemed to seep through the windows. "Just 2 more hours," I muttered to myself. 2 hours and you're home. As I navigated another curve, my headlights illuminated something in the middle of the road, a large black dog standing perfectly still, its eyes reflecting the light like burning coals. I slammed on the brakes, the heavy truck groaning in protest as I swerved to avoid hitting the animal. "Mierda!" I cursed, heart-pounding, as I brought the truck to a stop, half expecting to feel the sickening thump of impact. But when I looked in my rearview mirror, the road was empty. No dog, nothing. I exhaled slowly, wiping cold sweat from my forehead. Sleep deprivation. Had to be. I reached for my thermos, taking a long swig of lukewarm coffee before continuing down the winding road. La Rumorosa has claimed more lives than any other highway in Mexico. The crosses and makeshift shrines that line its curves tell stories of travelers who misjudged a turn or truckers whose brakes failed at the worst possible moment. Local legend says that the spirits of those who died violent deaths here remain trapped forever, reliving their final moments. My abuela used to warn me about driving during Dia de los Muertos. "It's when the veil between worlds is thinnest," she'd say, making the sign of the cross. "When the dead can walk among us seeking what they lost." I never put much stock in such superstitions. Growing up Catholic, I believed in heaven, hell, and purgatory, not spirits trapped on mountain roads. But that night, with the temperature continuing to drop and the fog thickening around my truck, I found myself recalling every ghost story I'd ever heard about La Rumorosa. The road widened slightly as I approached one of the few straightaways. My shoulders relaxed just for a moment. Then I saw them, a group of silent figures standing by the roadside, illuminated by what appeared to be candlelight. I slowed instinctively, straining to see through the fog. People out here. Perhaps a memorial service for someone who had died on the road, but when I blinked they were gone, just shadows cast by the gnarled cacti that dotted the mountainside. "You need sleep, Miguel," I said aloud, pinching my thigh hard to stay alert. "You're seeing things." Something moved in my peripheral vision, a dark shape passing by the passenger window. I jerked my head toward it, but saw only my own reflection in the glass. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone in the cab anymore. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and I found myself checking the rearview mirror every few seconds, half expecting to see someone sitting behind me. The road curved again, steeper this time, requiring my full attention. As I downshifted to navigate the grade, my headlights swept across a sign warning of the dangerous curve ahead. Below it, someone had spray-painted a crude skull with the words, "La Segadora espera," the Reaper waits. That's when it happened. A black SUV roared past me at impossible speed, its engine screaming as it overtook my truck on a blind curve. "Idiots!" I yelled, watching in disbelief as the vehicle disappeared around the bend. Seconds later, I heard the sound that has haunted my dreams ever since, the screech of brakes, then silence followed by the unmistakable crunch of metal against rock, and a distant impact as the vehicle tumbled down the mountainside. I braked hard, guiding my truck to the emergency pullout just beyond the curve. Heart hammering against my ribs, I grabbed my flashlight and radio and called in the accident. "This is Truck 387 reporting an accident on La Rumorosa, kilometer 63. SUV went over the edge. Need emergency services immediately." "I'm going to check for survivors." Only static answered me. I tried again, adjusting the frequency. Nothing. I grabbed my cell phone. No signal typical for this stretch of La Rumorosa. I was on my own. The night air hit me like a slap when I stepped out of the cab, far colder than it should have been for October, even in the mountains. My breath fogged in front of my face as I approached the edge of the cliff where the SUV had disappeared. I shined my flashlight down the steep slope and saw the vehicle about 30 meters below, stopped by a large outcropping of rock, a miracle that had prevented it from plummeting all the way to the bottom. The headlights were still on, casting an eerie beam into the emptiness beyond. Then I heard a man's voice, weak but distinct, calling up from below. "Ayúdanos, por favor, ayuda. Help us, please, help." Following the voice was the sound of children crying. "I'm coming," I shouted, already calculating how to reach them. "How many are you?" "4," the man's voice replied. "My wife, my 2 children, and me. My daughter is unconscious." Without hesitation, I ran back to my truck for rope and the first aid kit I always carried. I tied one end of the rope to my truck's tow bar and was about to begin my descent when I saw her. A woman stood in the middle of the road about 10 meters away. Under my truck's headlights, I could see she was elderly, perhaps in her 70s, wearing a long black dress that reached the ground and a black shawl covering her head. Her face was gaunt and deeply wrinkled, but her eyes, those eyes didn't belong to any living person I'd ever seen. They were completely black without whites, like 2 bottomless pits in her face. She raised one bony hand, gesturing for me to stop. "No vayas." Don't go. I froze the rope still in my hands. Where had she come from? There were no cars, no houses for miles. "Senora, there are people who need help," I said, trying to keep my voice steady despite the primordial fear her presence evoked. "Son los muertos del camino," she said, her eyes unblinking. "They are the road's dead." The plea for help came again, louder this time, accompanied by a child's name. "Elena, Elena, despierta. Elena, Elena, wake up." "I need to help them," I said, stepping around her. "They're still alive." The old woman moved with surprising speed, blocking my path once more. "La muerte ya los ha marcado." Death has already marked them. A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold night air. Before I could respond, she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Y si intervienes te marcara a ti también. And if you intervene, it will mark you too." I stared into those black eyes and felt ancient terror rise within me. But then a child's cry echoed from below, and something stronger than fear took over. "I'm sorry," I said, pushing past her and hurrying to the cliff's edge. Looking down, I could see the SUV had rolled onto its side. A man was trying to pull a child through the rear window while a woman stood nearby holding another child, both shaking and crying. "I'm coming to help," I called down, securing the rope around my waist. When I turned to look back at the road, the old woman had vanished. I told myself she must have walked away, perhaps a confused elderly woman from a nearby village. But why would she be here alone in the middle of the night? And why did her words make my blood run cold? No time to dwell on it. I began my descent carefully, picking my way down the rocky slope, the beam from my headlamp dancing across the jagged terrain as I made my way toward the wrecked vehicle. When I reached the SUV, I could see a man struggling to free a young girl from the back seat. A woman stood nearby, clutching a boy of about 6, both trembling and tear-streaked. "I'm here to help," I said, approaching them. "Is anyone seriously injured?" "My daughter." The man answered, his voice thick with worry. "She won't wake up. Please." I moved closer and looked at the child, a girl of about 8, with a wound on her forehead. I checked her pulse. It was there, but weak. "We need to get her up to the road," I said. "I've called for help, but I don't know how long they'll take to arrive." As I helped the man extract his daughter from the vehicle, I glanced at the license plate, JBK 548. Something about those numbers felt uncomfortably familiar, as if I'd seen them before. We carefully lifted the unconscious girl and began the difficult climb back to the highway. It was arduous. The mother and young boy went first, followed by the father and me supporting the unconscious girl. When we finally reached the top, I looked around for the old woman, but she remained gone. I helped the family into my truck, gently placing the girl on the passenger seat while her parents and brother squeezed into the back. "My name is Miguel," I said as I returned to the driver's seat. "I'll drive you to the nearest medical station." "Carlos," the man replied, still holding his shivering son tight. "This is my wife, Ana, our son Diego, and our daughter Elena. You saved us. We were trapped down there. No one was passing by." "It's nothing," I said, starting the engine. "We need to get Elena checked right away." As I turned the truck around and began driving, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw a figure standing where we had just been, the silhouette of the old woman in her black dress. And in that brief moment under my truck's taillights, I could swear she wasn't standing on the ground but hovering a few inches above it. I drove faster than I should have down the mountain, constantly checking on Elena in the passenger seat beside me. Her breathing was shallow but steady. In the back, her family sat in tense silence, broken only by the occasional stifled sob from Ana. "What happened?" I asked Carlos, trying to keep them talking and alert. Shock after an accident could be as dangerous as physical injuries. "I don't know," Carlos answered, his voice unsteady. "We were driving normally, and then I swear to God there was a woman standing in the middle of the road. I swerved to avoid her and lost control. She appeared from nowhere, Miguel." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, a cold sensation crawling up my spine. "An old woman in a black dress." Carlos was silent for a moment. "How did you know?" I didn't answer immediately. Ahead, the lights of a small gas station appeared, El Mirador, the last stop before Mexicali. I pulled into the parking lot. "Is there a medical station here?" Ana asked desperately. "No, but there's a phone," I replied. "I'll call for an ambulance." "They can get here faster than we can reach Mexicali in this condition." I parked near the illuminated convenience store and quickly went inside, explaining the situation to the man at the counter, a middle-aged man with a thick mustache and sleepy eyes. "Accident on La Rumorosa?" he asked, his expression suddenly grave. Again, he promptly called for an ambulance while I returned to the truck to check on the family. Elena remained unconscious, but at least her breathing seemed more stable. I used my first aid kit to clean the wound on her forehead, relieved to find it wasn't as deep as it had initially appeared. "The ambulance is on its way," I told Carlos and Ana. "About 20 minutes. Would you like to come inside and rest? Maybe get something to drink?" "I don't want to move, Elena," Carlos said, "but Diego might need some water." Ana nodded and led the boy into the store while Carlos and I stayed with Elena. A heavy silence fell between us. "Miguel," Carlos finally spoke, "do you believe in supernatural things?" I looked at him, seeing the fear and confusion in his eyes. "I've seen many things on these roads," I answered, carefully choosing my words. "Why do you ask?" "That woman, the one I saw on the road." Carlos lowered his voice as if afraid someone might overhear. "I can't explain it, but when I saw her, I felt like I knew something terrible was about to happen, and then we crashed." Carlos looked down at his daughter, gently stroking her hair. "And you know what's strangest? Right before I lost control, Elena, she was asleep, suddenly sat up and screamed, 'She's watching me, she's watching me.' I felt a cold current wrap around me despite the warmth inside the truck." "Do you think the woman I met on the road was the same one?" Carlos shrugged. "I don't know, but La Rumorosa. People tell many stories about this road." "What kind of stories?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. "La Llorona de la Rumorosa," Carlos whispered. "A local legend. They say an old woman appears before accidents like a sign." Or what?" "Or the cause," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "Drivers see her panic or try to avoid her and crash." A noise outside made us both jump. It was just Ana and Diego returning hands full of water bottles and some snack foods. "I bought you coffee," Ana said, handing me a large cup. "Thank you for everything." I nodded my thanks and accepted the coffee, but my mind was still revolving around the story Carlos had just shared. La Llorona de la Rumorosa. I had heard similar tales from fellow drivers, but had always dismissed them as stories meant to scare rookie truckers. We sat in silence, waiting, the atmosphere heavy with anxiety and unspoken questions. Diego eventually fell asleep in his mother's arms, exhausted from the traumatic experience. As I sipped my coffee, I noticed the gas station attendant coming outside, looking anxiously around the parking area. I lowered my window. "Is something wrong?" "The ambulance called back," he said, tension in his voice. "They're delayed because of another accident on the road. It will be at least an hour before they get here." Carlos and Ana exchanged worried looks. "I can drive you to the hospital in Mexicali," I offered. "It would only take about 45 minutes if we leave now." "Yes, please," Ana said immediately. As I prepared to start the engine, the gas station attendant placed his hand on my window, holding me back. He looked at me with a strange expression, then lowered his voice so only I could hear. "You saw La Vieja, didn't you?" "The old woman." I hesitated, then nodded. "Be careful," he whispered. "She's not an ordinary woman. She is la muerte misma, death herself." He reached into his pocket and handed me a small object, a silver pendant with a small crucifix. "Wear it," he said, "and don't stop until you reach the hospital, no matter what happens." I took the pendant, feeling the cold metal against my skin. "Thank you," I said, not knowing what else to say. He backed away, made the sign of the cross, and I started the engine, pulling out of the gas station toward Mexicali. The road ahead stretched through the desert, wider and safer than La Rumorosa, but still completely deserted at this hour. The eastern sky had begun to shift to a pale gray, signaling the approaching dawn. I tried to focus on driving, but the gas station attendant's words still echoed in my mind. La muerte misma, death herself. I had heard stories about Santa Muerte, the death saint, since I was a child, but never thought I would face something similar. "Do you have a family, Miguel?" Ana suddenly asked, perhaps to break the silence. "Wife and 2 children," I answered. "In Mexicali, and another on the way. They must worry when you work late like this." "They're used to it," I smiled faintly. "My wife always stays up until I call to say I've arrived safely. 7 years and not one exception." I paused, realizing I'd forgotten to call Marisol. She must be worried sick. I used to drive pickup trucks, Carlos said. Not big rigs like yours, but still long hauls. My wife hated it. I don't hate your work, Anna gently objected. I just hate the dangerous roads you have to travel. Like La Rumorosa, I said. Exactly, Carlos nodded. I always say a prayer before driving that road, especially at night. Do you believe in God, Miguel? Anna asked, her voice dropping. An odd question at this moment, but I understood why she asked. Faced with death, people often turn to faith. I do, I replied. I'm not a devout man, but I believe in something higher, and perhaps in other things as well. Other things? Carlos asked. I hesitated, not wanting to frighten them further. Just after so many years on the road, I've heard many stories. Sometimes wonder if there are things we don't understand. A soft moan interrupted our conversation. Elena was moving. Elena? Anna quickly leaned forward, touching her daughter's shoulder. Mija, can you hear me? The girl opened her eyes, looking around in confusion. Mama, where are we? You're safe now, Carlos said, his voice choked with emotion. We're going to the hospital. Elena scanned the truck's cabin, then her eyes settled on me. Who are you? My name is Miguel. I smiled at the girl through the rearview mirror. I'm helping your family. Elena studied me for a long moment with the eyes of a child who had seen too much. You talk to her, she said, not a question. I felt a chill run down my spine. To whom, sweetheart? The woman in black. Elena answered, her voice eerily calm. She's here. She's always here. Carlos and Anna exchanged worried glances. You've had a nightmare, Anna said, stroking her daughter's hair. You hit your head in the accident. But Elena shook her head adamant. It wasn't a nightmare, Mama. She follows us, she follows him. The girl pointed at me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, trying not to let my fear show. Children were often more sensitive to supernatural things. That's what my abuela always said. We'll be at the hospital soon, I said, keeping my voice steady. Everything will be fine. When I looked in the rearview mirror, I realized Elena was still staring at me with an expression that didn't belong on a child's face. She told you not to help us, Elena said softly. Why didn't you listen to her? Before I could answer, the fuel warning light on my dashboard suddenly illuminated. I stared at the gauge in disbelief. Just minutes ago it had shown nearly half a tank, but now it was indicating near empty. That's impossible, I muttered. What's wrong? Carlos asked, tension in his voice. Fuel, I replied. We're running out of fuel. But how can that be? Anna asked. We just left the gas station. I had no answer. By my calculations, we were still about 20 kilometers from Mexicali. We wouldn't get far on whatever fuel remained. And I had promised the man at the gas station that I wouldn't stop. Is there another gas station somewhere? Carlos asked, looking out the window into the dark desert landscape. No, nothing until Mexicali, I answered. We have to keep going. I pressed the accelerator more gently, hoping to conserve as much fuel as possible. The warning light remained brightly lit, a reminder of the inevitable. And then we heard it, a sputtering from the engine, followed by the telltale whine as it began to die from lack of fuel. The truck slowed slower and finally came to a complete stop on the emergency lane. No, 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 I muttered, trying to restart the engine, but to no avail. We were stranded in the desert about 15 kilometers from Mexicali with an injured child and no way to contact the outside world. I checked my cell phone, still no signal. Maybe a car will pass by, Anna said, trying to sound optimistic. But we all knew that at this hour the road was deserted. Not until sunrise would traffic pick up again. I could walk, Carlos suggested. If I start now, I could reach Mexicali by dawn and send help. No, I said too quickly. We shouldn't separate. I didn't voice what I was really thinking, that something was trying to prevent us from reaching Mexicali. Something that didn't want this family to survive. She did this, Elena suddenly said, her voice unnervingly calm. She doesn't want us to go. Elena, don't say such things, Anna gently scolded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. I tried to think. We could wait until morning, but that was hours away. Elena needed medical attention as soon as possible. "I'll try to find help," I decided. "You stay here, lock the doors. I'll walk along the road and see if anyone passes by." "Don't leave us," Anna whispered, grabbing my arm. "Please." "I'll come back," I promised. "Be careful and—" I stopped as I heard a distant sound, an engine. We all looked toward the road and saw headlights approaching from the distance. "Someone's coming," Carlos exclaimed, opening the door. "Wait," I said, feeling a strange suspicion. "Let me go out first." I opened the door and stepped onto the road, waving at the approaching vehicle. As it drew closer, I realized it was a highway patrol police truck. "Thank God," I whispered, waving more vigorously. The vehicle slowed and stopped in front of me. An officer stepped out, shining his flashlight in my face. "Is there a problem, senor?" he asked. "We have an emergency," I quickly explained. "A family in my truck. They were in an accident on La Rumorosa. The girl needs to get to a hospital, but we ran out of fuel." The officer lowered his flashlight, allowing me to see his face, a young man, perhaps in his early 30s, with a neatly trimmed mustache. "An accident on La Rumorosa," he repeated, something in his tone making me wary. "When?" "About 2 hours ago," I replied. "An SUV went off the road. I helped them up and was taking them to Mexicali when we ran out of fuel." The officer studied me longer than necessary, then looked toward my truck. "You say they're in your truck now, a whole family?" "Yes, a couple and 2 children. The girl hit her head." The officer nodded slowly. "I see. Let me have a look." He walked toward my truck and I followed. As we approached, Carlos opened the door and stepped out. "Thank God, officer. We need help. My daughter—" The officer looked at Carlos with a strange expression, then peered into the truck where Anna and the 2 children were sitting. He was silent for a long moment, then turned to me with darkened eyes. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice suddenly cold. "I told you already," I replied, confused. "I'm the one who helped them." "No, senor," the officer cut me off, his voice hardening. "Who are you, and what are you doing alone in the middle of the night on this road?" "Alone," I echoed, bewildered. "I'm not alone. They're right here." I turned to Carlos for confirmation, but he was no longer standing there. I looked into the truck, empty. No Ana, no Diego, no Elena. "What?" I stammered, trying to comprehend what was happening. "They were just here. I swear they were just here." The officer placed his hand on his gun. "Senor, I'm going to have to ask you to calm down and tell me exactly what's going on here." My head was spinning. How could an entire family vanish in the blink of an eye? I wasn't imagining this. I knew I wasn't crazy. "I told you the truth," I insisted. "A family crashed on La Rumorosa. I helped them and was taking them to the hospital. They were sitting right in my truck." "Have you been drinking tonight, senor?" the officer asked, his tone softening slightly. "No, I'm working," I exclaimed, desperate. "Check my truck, you'll find something, some sign of them." The officer hesitated, then climbed into my truck with his flashlight scanning around the cabin. I watched desperately, searching for any evidence that the family had been there. Diego's shoes, Anna's purse, anything, but there was nothing. The seats were as clean as if no one had ever sat there. "Senor," the officer said, his voice now more concerned than suspicious. "Perhaps you should come with me to the station." "You don't understand," I said, my voice nearly pleading. "They were real. Carlos, Ana, Diego, and Elena. They crashed on La Rumorosa. Their license plate was JVK 548. The officer froze, the flashlight dropping from his hand and shattering on the ground. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice suddenly changed. "What license plate number did you just say? JVK 548? I repeated, "Black SUV." "Why?" The officer took a step back, his face pale in the headlights. "Senor, that plate number. It belonged to a vehicle that crashed on La Rumorosa 3 years ago." "No." I shook my head violently. "No, that's impossible. I just pulled them out of that wreck. I touched them. I spoke to them. The girl, Elena, she had a head wound. I bandaged myself. Officer Ramirez." I could now read his name tag, and the headlight's glow stared at me, his expression a mixture of fear and concern. The Rodriguez family, Carlos, Ana, and their two children, Diego and Elena. They all died when their SUV went off La Rumorosa on October 30th, 3 years ago. My mouth went dry. How do you know their names? I never told you their names. Because I was one of the first responders on scene, Ramirez said quietly. His voice carried the weight of someone who had witnessed something he wished he could forget. I will never forget it. The vehicle fell nearly 100 meters. No one survived. I leaned against my truck for support, my legs suddenly weak. This isn't possible. I spoke with him. The girl woke up. She knew things. Ramirez approached me cautiously as if I might bolt. Señor Valdez, I don't know what happened to you tonight, but I can assure you that the Rodriguez family has been dead for 3 years. I attended their funeral. I stared at the dashboard, trying to collect my thoughts. Could it all have been a hallucination from exhaustion? No too many details, too vivid. Every word, every gesture, I couldn't have imagined all that. Elena, I whispered. She knew. Knew what? Ramirez asked. That they were dead. She talked about her, the woman in the black dress. She said she was following us. Ramirez was silent for a long moment, with only the sound of tires on asphalt, as a distant truck passed on the highway. Finally he spoke. Perhaps you should tell me everything from the beginning. And so I did. Everything. La Rumorosa, the accident, the old woman who tried to stop me. How I helped the family up from the ravine, the gas station, the crucifix pendant, the truck running out of fuel, and the mysterious disappearance. Ramirez listened without interruption. When I finished, he exhaled deeply. I'm not a superstitious man, he said, but there are things that happen on these roads, things that are hard to explain. He paused. Especially at this time of year? Dia de los Muertos, I said. Exactly. When the boundary between the living and the dead is as thin as a sheet of paper. Ramirez fell silent again. You mentioned the old woman tried to stop you. I nodded. She said they were the dead of the road, and if I helped them, death would mark me. Ramirez muttered something in Spanish and made the sign of the cross. La Segadora, he said. Who? La Segadora, the harvester. Another form of La Muerte. He glanced at me. Some say she appears to guide the newly deceased, those who don't know they're dead. Others say she warns the living not to interfere with death's plan. And I didn't listen, I said, feeling a chill run down my spine. You didn't listen, Ramirez confirmed. So what have I done? I asked, my voice tense. Have I helped souls leave the place where they were trapped? Or, Ramirez said, his voice lowering, you've interfered with death's business, and death rarely forgives that. We drove into Mexicali, the streetlights and low buildings, dispelling some of the darkness within me. The city was waking up, early traders preparing for a new day. Ramirez took me to the police station where I repeated my story to Captain Ortega. They checked my driver's license and truck papers, called the company to confirm I was on shift. I knew they were considering the possibility that I was hallucinating from drugs or exhaustion, but tests would find nothing. I was completely lucid when it all happened. Ramirez brought out an old file and placed it on the table. Inside were reports and photographs from the Rodriguez family accident. I stared at their pictures, Carlos with his broad smile and thick black hair, Ana beautiful with her kind eyes, mischievous Diego and Elena with those knowing eyes, the same family I had spent the past 2 hours talking to and helping. It's been exactly 3 years, Captain Ortega said. Today is the anniversary of their death. I felt a profound chill. Not a coincidence, I whispered. During Dia de los Muertos, some souls returned to where they died, Ramirez said. Perhaps they're still looking for a way to escape their fate. And I tried to help them, I said. Ortega and Ramirez exchanged glances. Señor Valdez, Ortega said, his tone serious. You have a family, correct? Yes, I replied, confused. Wife and 2 children, and 1 on the way. Call them, he said. Right now. Tell them you're here and safe. Why? Just do it, Ramirez interrupted. Please. I used the station phone to call Marisol. She answered after the first ring, her voice filled with worry. Miguel, mi amor, I've been so worried you were supposed to call hours ago. I'm sorry, Querida, I said, feeling a strange relief at hearing her voice. Something unexpected happened. I'm at the Mexicali police station. What? What happened? Are you hurt? I'm fine, don't worry. I'll explain later. I'll be home soon. When I hung up, Ortega handed me a cup of coffee. Drink, he said. You look like you need it. I took a sip, feeling the hot liquid bringing life back to my exhausted body. What now? I asked. Now, Ramirez said, we call a tow truck for your vehicle and get you home. That's it, I asked, surprised. You don't think I'm crazy? We've been in this job long enough to know that not everything can be explained, Ortega said, studying me intently. But we've also lived here long enough to know that when death gives you a warning, you should listen. Warning. La Segadora warned you not to help them, Ramirez reminded me. And then you met them. The spirits of those who died in that accident. Perhaps they're still trying to escape their fate, but that might come at a price. What price? I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. The price of interfering with death's business, Ortega said. La Segadora doesn't just guide the souls of the dead, she also marks the living who get in her way. Marks them how? Ramirez and Ortega exchanged glances again. Miguel, Ramirez said, using my first name for the first time. You're not the first person to encounter spirits on La Rumorosa, especially around Dia de los Muertos. And those people, they often have accidents afterward, on that same road. I felt my body go cold. You're saying I'm marked, that I'll have an accident. I'm saying you should be careful, Ramirez replied. Very careful. At least until Dia de los Muertos is over. I sat there trying to process it all. My memories of Elena and her family were still vivid in my mind. I had helped them, tried to save them, but from what they had been dead for 3 years, there was nothing I could do to change that. Can I help them somehow? I asked, my voice hoarse. The Rodriguez family, are they still trapped there? It's not our business to help the dead find peace, Ortega said. That's the work of priests of rituals of prayers. As a truck driver, your job is to drive safely and return to your family. Ramirez placed a hand on my shoulder. However, I can suggest one thing. If you want to help them and protect yourself, set up a small altar for them during Dia de los Muertos. Remember them. Sometimes that's all souls need to be remembered. I nodded, grateful for the advice. I'll do that. The police called a tow truck for my vehicle and Ramirez volunteered to drive me home. The journey passed in silence, both of us lost in our own thoughts. When we reached my apartment in eastern Mexicali, dawn was beginning to pink the horizon. Ramirez stopped in front of my building. Miguel, he said as I prepared to leave. One more piece of advice, don't drive until Dia de los Muertos is over, especially stay away from La Rumorosa. I nodded. Thank you for everything. Cuida tu familia, he said. Take care of your family. And remember there was a reason why La Segadora warned you. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, feeling my body heavy with exhaustion and thoughts of everything that had happened. When I opened the door, my wife Marisol rushed into my arms. I was so worried, she whispered against my chest. You didn't call, you didn't come home. I'm sorry. I held her tighter. I had a strange night. She looked up at me, eyes full of concern. What happened? Why were you at the police station? I'll tell you after I rest a bit, I said. I'm exhausted. She nodded, leading me inside. Our 2 children were still asleep, one small blessing of returning home so early. Do you want something to eat? Marisol asked. No, thank you, I just need to sleep. She led me to our bedroom where I quickly changed clothes and collapsed into bed. Exhaustion overwhelmed me, but as I closed my eyes, the image of Elena and her knowing eyes still haunted me. You didn't listen to her, Elena's voice echoed in my mind. Why didn't you listen to her? I fell into a sleep filled with nightmares of sheer cliffs, falling vehicles, and an old woman in a black dress, her bottomless black eyes watching my every move. When I woke late afternoon, light was streaming through the window. I had slept all day. Marisol sat beside the bed, placing a tray of food on the nightstand. "I thought you might be hungry," she smiled weakly. "You've been talking in your sleep about a girl named Elena and an old woman in a black dress." I sat up, realizing how ravenous I was. "Thank you," I said, taking the tray. "Marisol, I need to tell you what happened last night." And so I told her everything. Marisol listened without interruption, though I could see fear and concern growing in her eyes as my story progressed. "Miguel," she finally said when I finished, "that sounds insane, but I know you wouldn't make this up." "I know it sounds crazy," I replied, pushing the empty plate away. "But that's the truth, every word of it." "My grandmother used to talk about La Segadora," Marisol said. "She said sometimes the dead don't know they're dead and they need a guide." "You believe me?" I asked, surprised. "Of course, mi amor. Isn't this why we always build a large altar for Dia de los Muertos? So our departed loved ones can find their way home?" She squeezed my hand. "Tomorrow is the first day of the festival. We'll build an altar for the Rodriguez family." I smiled, grateful for her understanding. "Thank you. But you must promise me one thing," Marisol said, her voice suddenly serious. "Don't drive until the festival is over. Stay home with me and the children." "I promise," I said, remembering Ramirez's warning. "I've already called the company. They understand. I told them I was sick." Marisol nodded, relieved. "Good. Now, rest more if you need to." That evening we had dinner with our children, and afterward we began preparing for Dia de los Muertos. The kids were excited to decorate the streets with vibrant marigold flowers and sugar skulls. Marisol and I started building the traditional altar one for our departed relatives, and a smaller one specifically for the Rodriguez family. I placed items we had purchased, candles, flowers, sugar skulls, and 4 photographs I had found at the local library, old pictures of Carlos, Ana, Diego, and Elena from a newspaper article about the accident. Marisol added small toys for the children and a bottle of tequila for Carlos. "So they'll be remembered," I whispered, lighting candles on the altar. That night we joined the local parade, walking through the streets of Mexicali with thousands of others, all carrying lanterns and singing traditional songs. The atmosphere was both joyful and solemn, a celebration of life and death. When we returned home, I felt a peace I hadn't expected. Perhaps this was the meaning of Dia de los Muertos, not to fear death, but to honor it as part of life. As I prepared for bed, the phone rang. I hesitated. It was nearly midnight. "Hello," I answered. "Miguel Valdez?" A familiar voice. "Ramirez?" "Yes." "I'm sorry to call so late, but I thought you should know. We just received a report from a truck driver. He claims to have seen a family, a man, a woman, and 2 children standing beside a damaged SUV on La Rumorosa." My heart raced faster. The Rodriguez family. He didn't know their names, but the description matches. He stopped to help, but when he approached, they vanished. "At what location?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Exactly where the accident happened 3 years ago." I was silent, trying to process what this meant. "Miguel," Ramirez continued, "they're still looking for someone to help them, and I'm afraid they'll keep looking until they find someone." "But why me?" I asked. "Why did they choose me?" "I don't know," Ramirez admitted. "But be careful. Stay home tonight. Don't go out." "I won't be going anywhere," I promised, looking toward the small altar for the Rodriguez family. The candles were still burning, casting shadows on their photographs, making them appear almost alive in the dancing light. I hung up and returned to the bedroom where Marisol was already asleep. I lay down beside her, grateful for her warmth and presence. But sleep didn't come easily. I kept thinking about the Rodriguez family still trapped on La Rumorosa, waiting for someone to help them escape their fate. I woke in darkness, unsure of how long I had slept. The apartment was silent, with only the soft ticking of the clock in the living room. Marisol still slept peacefully beside me. There was a knock at the door. I looked at the clock, 3:02 a.m. Who could be knocking at this hour? The knock came again, soft but insistent. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Marisol, and went to the door. A feeling of dread rose within me as I approached. I knew in some inexplicable way who was standing on the other side. I peered through the peephole and saw a little girl standing in the hallway, Elena Rodriguez, in the same white dress she had worn when I met her on La Rumorosa. I stood there frozen, unsure what to do. Elena looked directly at the peephole as if she could see me through it. "Señor Miguel," she said, her voice echoing strangely in the empty hallway, "please help us." "Elena," I whispered, "you shouldn't be here." "We need you," she continued. "We're still trapped. She won't let us go. She la Segadora." Elena nodded, her eyes sorrowful beyond bearing. "She keeps us there, on that road. We can't leave. We can't move on." "What do you want me to do?" I asked, though part of me was screaming that I shouldn't be talking to her, that this was a trap. "Come back," Elena said. "Come back to that road. Help us be free." "Elena, you're dead," I said, my voice trembling. "Your whole family. 3 years ago." "There's nothing I can do to change that." The girl shook her head, tears glistening in her large eyes. "We know we're dead. We just want to be free. She won't let us move on." "But why me? Why not someone else?" "Because you saw us," Elena said simply. "Because you helped us. Because you weren't afraid." I laughed bitterly. "I am afraid, Elena. I'm very afraid." "But you still helped us," the girl said. "Please, Señor Miguel, one more time." I shook my head. "I can't. I have a family. I have responsibilities." Elena's face grew sad. "We understand. We're sorry to have bothered you." She turned away, beginning to walk down the hallway with soundless steps. "Elena, wait!" I called, not knowing why I did. The girl stopped, turning back to look at me. "Why can't you move on?" I asked. "What's holding you back?" "We don't know," she answered. "But she says that we're not finished, that there's something that must be done before we can go." "What thing?" Elena shook her head. "We don't know. We've been trying to figure it out for 3 years. That's why we need help." I looked at the child, my heart breaking at the thought of a family trapped in an endless loop of their own death moment, unable to continue their journey. "All right," I heard myself say. "I'll help you. I'll find out what's holding you back." A spark of hope lit in Elena's eyes. "Really, Señor Miguel?" "Really," I promised, though I had no idea how to keep that promise. "I'll help you." "Thank you," the girl said, a small smile appearing. "But please hurry, Señor Miguel. Time is running out." "Time?" I asked. "What do you mean?" "When Dia de los Muertos ends," she explained, "the door will close. We'll be trapped for another year." And with those words, she turned and disappeared into the darkness of the hallway, leaving me standing alone with a promise I didn't know how to fulfill. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by old newspapers and printouts of accident reports that Ramirez had faxed to me. I had called him right after Elena left, telling him about our encounter. "Be careful, Miguel," he had warned. "Sometimes the spirits of the dead can be deceptive. They want what they cannot have life." But I had promised Elena I would help, and I couldn't ignore that promise. So I began researching, looking for clues about what might be keeping the Rodriguez family tied to La Rumorosa. I also discovered that the company Carlos had worked for, Transports Baja, had gone bankrupt just months after the accident. The owner, a man named Guillermo Vega, had moved away from Mexicali not long after. I learned about La Segadora as well, reading everything I could find about the death figure in Mexican culture. Most were folk tales, but there was a common theme. La Segadora appears when death is near or when the souls of the dead cannot continue their journey. And that night I waited. After Marisol and the children were asleep, I sat in the living room with the altar, hoping Elena would return. At midnight there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, it wasn't Elena, but the entire Rodriguez family standing in the hallway, Carlos, Ana Diego, and Elena, all dressed exactly as they had been when I met them on La Rumorosa. "We don't have much time," Carlos said. "Elena said you're trying to help us." "Come in," I invited, stepping back. "I need to ask you about that night, about the accident." They entered, making no sound as they moved. Carlos and Ana sat on the sofa while Diego and Elena stood beside them. It was strange seeing them in my apartment present, but not quite real, like faded shadows of who they once were. "We don't remember much about the accident," Ana said. Just fragments. I understand. I nodded. But there are some things I need to know. Why were you on La Rumorosa at midnight? Why were you carrying $20,000 in cash? Carlos and Ana exchanged glances, something like guilt flashing across their faces. We were running away, Carlos finally admitted. I had done something bad. What? I asked. I worked for Transportes Baja, Carlos explained. It was a normal company, until it wasn't. The boss Guillermo started using drivers to transport drugs. Small amounts at first, hidden in legitimate shipments. Then more and more. And you participated? I asked, trying not to judge. Not because I wanted to, Carlos said, his voice full of regret. Guillermo threatened me. Threatened my family. I didn't see that I had any other choice. Until that night. Ana continued, taking her husband's hand. That night, Carlos decided he couldn't do it anymore. He took the money from a deal, and we decided to run. To Tijuana, then across the border to the U.S. We knew they would come after us, Carlos said, his eyes darkening. That's why we took La Rumorosa at night. We thought we could get away. But then you saw La Segadora, I said. Carlos nodded. She stood in the middle of the road. I swerved to avoid her, and he stopped, not needing to finish the sentence. We died because of that money, Ana said softly. Because of that decision. That's why we can't move on, Carlos said. That money, it was found in the wreckage, but no one knew where it came from. It went back to Guillermo. He used it to continue his business, to keep hurting others. And where is he now? I asked. He's still here in Mexicali, Elena suddenly spoke up. We can sense it. He's still doing bad things. I thought about this. So that's what's holding you back, that the money went back to Guillermo, that he wasn't punished? We're not sure, Carlos admitted, but we feel guilty. For dying because of that dirty money, for letting him continue. And La Segadora, I asked. What does she tell you? She says we have an unpaid debt, Ana replied. That we cannot move on until it's paid. A debt, I repeated, trying to understand. Could exposing Guillermo pay that debt? Carlos and Ana exchanged glances. Perhaps, Carlos said. But how could you do that? He's very powerful, very dangerous. Let me worry about that, I said, a plan forming in my mind. If I could find evidence of what he did, of how he threatened you, maybe I could give it to the police. You would do that for us? Ana asked, hope in her voice. I'll try, I promised. For you. And for myself. Be careful, Señor Miguel, Elena warned. He's a bad man, and if he finds out you're investigating him, he might hurt you. I'll be careful, I assured the child. But I need to know where Guillermo is now. La Condesa district, Carlos replied. He has a big mansion there. He likes to flaunt his wealth. I nodded. All right, I'll find a way to investigate him, but I'll need more time. Time is running short, Ana reminded me. Only one more day. I know, I said. I'll work as quickly as I can. They stood up, preparing to leave. Elena came closer to me, placing a cold hand on mine. Thank you, Señor Miguel, she said, for helping us. Don't thank me until I've actually helped you, I said. As they headed for the door, Carlos paused, turning back to look at me. Miguel, there's one more thing. Death has marked you because you interfered with its business. But if you can help us pay that debt, perhaps the mark will be lifted. I hope so, I said, for all our sakes. After they left, I sat down, my head swimming with information. I knew I was venturing into dangerous territory. Guillermo Vega was a drug trafficker, a dangerous man. But I also knew I had no other choice. If I wanted to help the Rodriguez family and perhaps save myself, I needed to confront this devil. The next morning I called Ramirez and told him about my meeting with the Rodriguez family. He listened attentively, not interrupting. Do you know Guillermo Vega? I asked when I finished. Know of him? Ramirez admitted. Slippery character. We've suspected him of drug trafficking for years, but could never prove anything. He has friends in high places. So your department can't do anything? It's not that we can't do anything, Ramirez corrected. It's just that we need real evidence, which we've never had. What if I could find that evidence? There was silence on the other end. Miguel Ramirez finally spoke. "You shouldn't get involved in this, it's dangerous." "I'm already marked Ramirez," I reminded him. "I'll have an accident on La Rumorosa unless I can help the Rodriguez family pay their debt. I'll die unless I get involved in this." Ramirez exhaled heavily. "All right, but I can't help you officially. If Vega found out the police were investigating him—" "I understand," I said. "But maybe you could help me unofficially information advice?" Another silence. "Meet me at Café Doña Rosa in an hour, and Miguel, don't tell anyone about this." "I won't," I promised. I told Marisol I needed to go out for a bit, but wasn't going anywhere near La Rumorosa. She wasn't happy, but I convinced her this was something I needed to do. At the cafe, Ramirez was waiting at a back table dressed in civilian clothes. He looked around nervously as I sat down. "Here," he said, sliding a small folder across the table. "Everything we have on Vega. Not much, but it might help." I flipped through the pages, addresses, known businesses, connections. "Do you think Transportes Baja was just one part of his operation?" Almost certainly. Ramirez nodded. "He owned several other businesses, a restaurant, a nightclub. All fronts, I think." "I need to find evidence," I said. "Something to connect him to the drugs, to the Rodriguez family's death." "That won't be easy." Ramirez leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Listen, there's someone, a former driver for Vega, Felix Cardenas. He quit after the Rodriguez accident. I always suspected he knew something, but he was too scared to talk." "Where is he?" "A small farm outside the city." Ramirez handed me a piece of paper with an address. "But Miguel, you need to be careful. Vega has eyes and ears everywhere." "I'll be careful," I promised. "Thank you, Ramirez, for everything." "Don't thank me," he said seriously. "Just survive and return to your family. That's what matters." I nodded and left the cafe, my mind already focused on the task ahead. Felix Cardenas's farm was a small plot about 20 kilometers east of Mexicali. I drove there carefully, watching to see if anyone was following me. The farm looked modest but well kept, a small house with a stable and a small field. As I parked, a man emerged from the stable, around 50, with sun-darkened skin and a long scar running down the right side of his face. "Felix Cardenas?" I asked as I got out of the car. The man stiffened. "Who's asking?" "My name is Miguel Valdez," I said. "I'm a truck driver. I need to talk to you about Guillermo Vega and Carlos Rodriguez." Cardenas backed away. "I don't know who you're talking about." "Please," I pleaded, "I'm not one of Vega's men. I'm trying to find out the truth about what happened to the Rodriguez family." "Why?" he asked, still wary. "They've been dead 3 years. It was a tragic accident." "It wasn't just an accident," I said, deciding to be direct. "I know about the drugs, about Carlos trying to leave with the money, about Vega threatening him." Cardenas's face went pale. "You shouldn't be talking about these things." "I have to talk about them," I insisted, "because Carlos, Ana, and their 2 children can't rest until the truth is exposed." "You should go," Cardenas said, turning to walk away. "You quit after the accident," I said, making him stop. "Why was it because you knew it wasn't an accident, because you knew Vega was involved?" Cardenas slowly turned back, his eyes darkening. "You have no idea what you're getting into, Valdez." "I know exactly what I'm getting into," I said. "I've met them, Cardenas. The Rodriguez family, their spirits, they told me everything." He looked at me as if I'd grown a second head. "You're insane." "I'm not," I replied. "And I think you know that. I think you've seen them too. Is that why you left, why you're hiding here?" He stared at me for a long moment, then sighed deeply. "Come inside. We shouldn't talk out here." Inside the small house, Cardenas handed me a cup of coffee, then sat across from me at a small table. "I worked for Vega for 10 years, he began. "It was legitimate transport at first, but then he started asking us to carry other packages, drugs, weapons. We had no choice. Once you know about his operation, he owns you. And Carlos was the same." Cardenas nodded. "Carlos was a good man, a family man. He hated it. And then one day he decided he couldn't take it anymore. He took money from a deal, $20,000, and tried to run with his family. Vega knew. Vega always knows, Cardenas said bitterly. He has people everywhere. He sent men after Carlos following them on La Rumorosa. I felt my blood freeze. Are you saying it wasn't an accident that they were killed? I don't know for sure, Cardenas admitted. Vega's men were following them, but then they said Carlos lost control and went over the edge before they could catch him. Maybe he saw them in his rearview mirror and panicked, or maybe they forced him off the road, I said. Maybe. Cardenas nodded. I never knew the truth. But I know Vega got his money back, and he continued business as if nothing had happened. And you quit. After the accident, I couldn't take it anymore, Cardenas said. I knew Carlos. I had met his family. When I thought about those 2 children dead because of Vega's greed, he shook his head. I told Vega I was done. I thought he would kill me, but instead he let me go with a warning never to speak about what I knew. And you've kept silent for 3 years. What choice did I have? Cardenas asked bitterly. Vega is powerful. Would you testify against him? I asked. If given the chance. Cardenas looked out the window silent for a long time. Why do you care about all this Valdez? Why now, after 3 years? I told him about my experience on La Rumorosa, about meeting the Rodriguez family, about La Segadora and her warning. I knew it sounded insane, but I didn't care anymore. I needed Cardenas's help. When I finished, he looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. I saw them, he finally admitted. The Rodriguez family. A year after the accident, he nodded. I was driving through La Rumorosa and saw them standing by the roadside. At first I thought I was going mad, but they looked exactly the same. Carlos told me they were trapped, that they couldn't move on until the debt was paid. The debt, I repeated. That's what they told me. I think they meant Vega, Cardenas said, about the truth, but I was too afraid. I ran away. He looked at me, his expression pained. I abandoned them. Again. It's not too late, I said. You can help them now. We can help them. How? By bringing Vega into the light, by telling the truth. Cardenas laughed bitterly. Just my testimony won't be enough, Valdez. We need evidence. Then we'll find evidence, I said, a plan forming in my mind. There are still other drivers working for him, right? A few I keep in touch with, Cardenas admitted. Good, I nodded. Because I have an idea. But I'll need your help. We spent the rest of the day planning. Cardenas contacted people he trusted, other drivers who had worked for Vega, who knew the truth but were too scared to speak up. I called Ramirez, sharing what we had learned and requesting his support. And as night fell on the second day of Dia de los Muertos, we were ready. This is a big gamble, Ramirez warned as we met at an abandoned warehouse outside Mexicali. If Vega discovers what we're doing, I know the risk, I said, but I have no other choice. We only have one shot, Cardenas said, standing with 3 other drivers who had agreed to testify. If this fails, Vega will kill us all. It will work, I asserted, though I wasn't as confident as I tried to sound. It has to work. Our plan was simple and incredibly dangerous. One of the drivers still working for Vega would wear a hidden recording device during tonight's delivery. He would try to get Vega talking about Carlos Rodriguez, about the accident, about the drugs. If we could get that confession along with the testimony of the other drivers, perhaps it would be enough to arrest Vega. But so much could go wrong. Too much. As we waited tense and silent, I couldn't help but think about Elena and her family still trapped on La Rumorosa, waiting for a redemption that might never come. And I thought about my own family, Marisol, and our children who might lose me if this didn't succeed. Are you all right, Valdez? Cardenas asked, noticing my expression. Just thinking, I replied, about all the people hurt by men like Vega. Cardenas nodded. That's why we have to stop him. Ramirez's phone rang, making us all jump. He answered, listened, then nodded grimly. Our driver's on his way, he said as he hung up. He got it. The confession. A wave of relief swept through the room, but it was quickly dispelled by what Ramirez said next. But he thinks Vega suspects something. We need to move fast. Part 3. The climax. We waited in anxious silence, all eyes fixed on the door. Finally, we heard a vehicle approaching, and a younger man, Miguel, our driver, rushed in his face, drenched in sweat. "I got it," he panted, handing Ramirez a small recording device. "But I think they're watching me. We need to leave now immediately." We didn't wait for further explanation. Ramirez and I quickly led the drivers to our vehicles, preparing to take them to the police station where they could be protected while giving their statements. But as we stepped outside, we saw a line of vehicles, waiting black SUVs with men in suits standing beside them, guns in hand. "Vega," Cardenas whispered, his face ashen. "Get back," Ramirez ordered, drawing his weapon. "Back inside the warehouse." We retreated, rushing back in, but it was too late. Gunfire erupted, and Miguel fell, blood spurting from a wound in his back. "Miguel!" Cardenas cried, kneeling beside the younger man. "This way," Ramirez called, pointing toward a rear door. "We have to get out of here." I helped Cardenas with Miguel, but it was clear he was gone. We laid him down gently and ran after Ramirez, the other drivers following. We ran through a maze of shipping containers, trying to escape Vega's men. Gunfire continued behind us, bullets whizzing through the air. "My car's over there," Ramirez shouted, pointing to a police vehicle parked nearby. But as we approached it, a black SUV appeared, blocking our path. The door opened and a man stepped out, tall, slender, with platinum white hair and an expensive suit. "Guillermo Vega," Cardenas whispered. "Felix Vega," said his voice, dangerously soft. "It's been a long time, and this must be Officer Ramirez, whom I've heard so much about." "Give it up, Vega," Ramirez said, gun trained on the drug trafficker. "We have your confession on tape. You're finished." Vega chuckled. "I'm afraid no recording will survive longer than tonight, nor will any of you." "You can't kill us all," I said, stepping forward. "You can't run forever." Vega looked at me, curious. "And who might you be?" "My name is Miguel Valdez," I said, "and I know what you did to the Rodriguez family." Vega's eyes narrowed. "Rodriguez, Carlos Rodriguez? That's what all this is about, a greedy driver who died in an accident 3 years ago?" "It wasn't an accident," I said. "Your men followed him. They forced him off the road." Vega laughed loudly. "You can't prove that." "Maybe not," I admitted. "But we can prove you're using your drivers to transport drugs. We can prove you threatened them, coerced them, and that will be enough to finish you." Vega's smile vanished. "No one can finish me, Señor Valdez. No one." "Carlos Rodriguez tried," I said, "and you killed him for it. You killed his entire family." "Carlos was a traitor," Vega growled, his face twisting with anger. "He tried to steal from me. Yes, I sent men after him. And when they caught up with him on La Rumorosa, they taught him a lesson that clearly still hasn't been learned." "You just admitted it," Ramirez said quietly, pointing to the phone recording in his jacket pocket. "You just admitted to killing the Rodriguez family." Vega's expression froze. In that moment, I knew things could go one of two ways. Either we'd leave here with the confession, or we'd never leave here at all. And then something impossible happened. A figure appeared behind Vega, an elderly woman in a long black dress that reached the ground, La Segadora. She placed a bony hand on Vega's shoulder, and though the drug trafficker couldn't feel it, he suddenly shivered as if cold. "What the hell?" he muttered, looking down at his trembling body. And then from the darkness, 4 other figures appeared: Carlos, Ana, Diego, and Elena Rodriguez. They stood in a circle around Vega, invisible to him but clear to me. "This is the debt," Elena said softly, looking at me. "This is the truth." Vega spun around, clearly sensing something but seeing nothing. "Who's there?" he snapped, drawing his gun. "Surrender, Vega," Ramirez repeated. "Now, before anyone else dies." A tense moment stretched. Then Vega, with an angry roar, turned his gun toward us. The gunshot echoed. But it wasn't from Vega's gun. It was from Ramirez's, who had fired first, the bullet striking Vega's shoulder. The drug trafficker fell, his gun clattering from his hand. His men, seeing their boss wounded, opened fire, but Ramirez had prepared for this. He had called for backup, And at that moment the area around the warehouse was flooded with police cars, lights flashing and sirens wailing. The gunfire ceased. Vega lay on the ground, blood flowing from his shoulder, wound his eyes dark with anger and pain. "This isn't over," he hissed as Ramirez handcuffed him. "I'll find you, Valdez. I'll find you and—" "Enough, Vega!" Ramirez cut him off, pulling the drug trafficker to his feet. "You're finished, this time for good." As Vega was led away, I looked around for the Rodriguez family. They stood together, watching me with serene expressions. Elena stepped forward. "Thank you, Señor Miguel," the girl said. "You helped us pay that debt." "You can move on now?" I asked. Carlos nodded, holding Anna's hand. "We can finally rest." "You're no longer marked," Elena said. "You can go home to your family." "She says so." I looked over at La Segadora, who was watching me with her bottomless black eyes. She nodded once, a gesture I understood as approval or perhaps forgiveness. "I'm sorry for what happened to you," I said to the Rodriguez family. "I wish I could have done more." "You did enough," Anna smiled. "Now we can move on. We can be together." "Goodbye, Señor Miguel," Elena said, waving. "Thank you for believing us." And with those words they began to fade, becoming transparent and finally disappearing, leaving only La Segadora. She looked at me for a long moment, her black eyes contemplative, then nodded once more and dissolved into the night. "I don't know how to thank you, Miguel," Cardenas said, stepping beside me. "You did what no one else dared, stood up to Vega, exposed the truth." "I didn't do it alone," I said, "and I had some help." Cardenas looked at me curiously but didn't ask further. Perhaps he understood in his own way. Ramirez approached his face solemn but with a hint of a smile. "We got Vega. With his confession, the driver's testimony, and the recording, he'll never see outside a prison again." "What about his men?" I asked. "We'll find and arrest all of them," Ramirez assured me. "His organization is finished, Miguel. You helped end it." "Not just me," I said. "All of us." "Go home to your family, Miguel," Ramirez said, squeezing my shoulder. "They're waiting for you." So I went home, my heart lighter than I could have imagined. Marisol was waiting at the door, embracing me tightly as I entered. "I've been worried sick," she said. "I saw the news on TV about the shootout about Vega." "It's over," I assured her, holding her closer. "Vega's been arrested. The Rodriguez family can rest, and I'm no longer marked." Marisol looked up at me, her eyes wet. "Are you sure?" "Sure," I nodded. "I paid their debt, the debt of truth." The following morning, the final day of Dia de los Muertos, we visited the cemetery where the Rodriguez family was buried. We brought flowers, candles, and toys for the children, placing them on the grave and observing a moment of silence. "Do you think they've found peace?" Marisol asked as we walked back to the car. "I think so," I said, looking back at the graves. "I think they're finally free." As we drove home, I couldn't help but glance toward La Rumorosa, the mountain looming in the distance. I knew I would never look at it the same way again, not with fear, but perhaps with respect. For La Rumorosa had taught me that the boundary between the living and the dead is thin, that some debts transcend death, and that sometimes the warnings we receive are not meant to frighten us, but to protect us from things we don't yet understand. That night, as Dia de los Muertos drew to a close, I sat alone in our living room after Marisol and the children had gone to bed. The candles on the Rodriguez family altar had burned low, their photographs illuminated in the flickering light. I raised a small glass of tequila I'd poured for Carlos. "May you rest in peace," I whispered, taking a sip. "All of you." As I set the glass down, I noticed something on the table that hadn't been there before, a small silver crucifix, identical to the one the gas station attendant had given me, which I had lost during the confrontation with Vega. I picked it up, feeling its cool weight in my palm. A chill ran down my spine, not from fear, but from the realization that some things in this world will always remain beyond our understanding. I placed the crucifix on the altar beside the photographs and whispered, "Gracias." The candle flames wavered as if in response, then steadied. In the months that followed, life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be after everything I had experienced. I continued driving, though I made a point of never taking La Rumorosa at night, especially around Dia de los Muertos. Vega's trial made headlines across Mexico. With the recordings, the testimony of the drivers, and the evidence seized from his properties, he was sentenced to 30 years in prison. His criminal empire crumbled, his associates either arrested or fled. Our third child was born a girl we named Elena. Marisol hadn't questioned when I suggested the name. Perhaps she understood in her way the connection I felt to a child I had met only in the strangest of circumstances. I still thought about the Rodriguez family often. Sometimes when driving at night, I would catch a glimpse of something in my rearview mirror, a child's face perhaps, or the silhouette of a woman. But when I looked again, there would be nothing there. 1 year after my encounter on La Rumorosa, I visited the site of the accident. I placed flowers and candles, said a prayer, and stood in silence, remembering. As I turned to leave, I saw a small figure standing a distance away, a little girl in a white dress. She smiled, waved once, and then was gone. That night I dreamed of La Rumorosa. In the dream, I was driving again, my headlights cutting through the fog. But this time, when I saw the SUV go over the edge, I kept driving. When I saw La Segadora standing by the roadside, I nodded to her and passed by. And when I heard the cries for help from the ravine, I pressed the accelerator and left them behind. I woke in a cold sweat, the dream so vivid I could still feel the steering wheel in my hands. Beside me, Marisol slept peacefully, her face serene in the moonlight filtering through our window. I slipped out of bed and went to check on our children. All three slept soundly, our youngest Elena with her small fist curled beside her face. In the living room, I stood before the window looking out at the night sky. The stars seemed especially bright, the moon full and luminous. "I understand now," I whispered to no one and everyone. "Some souls are meant to be helped. Others must find their own way." A soft breeze stirred the curtains, though the window was closed. I never saw the Rodriguez family again after that night at the warehouse. But sometimes, when driving past certain crosses and shrines along Mexico's highways, I would slow down, offer a silent prayer, and remember a little girl who once asked for my help. And sometimes I would hear a whisper on the wind, a thank you perhaps, or a warning. For those who listen carefully, the dead have many stories to tell. And La Rumorosa, the road where souls linger, will always whisper its secrets to those brave enough or foolish enough to hear them. The following October, as Dia de los Muertos approached once more, I found myself with a delivery that would take me near La Rumorosa. Despite my usual avoidance, I accepted the job. Some part of me felt drawn back to that place, as if there was still something unfinished. I arrived at the mountain pass just as the sun was setting, painting the rocky landscape in hues of gold and crimson. As darkness fell, I switched on my headlights and began the treacherous descent. The radio crackled with static, then cleared to play a familiar bolero, the same one I had heard a year before. I didn't turn it off this time. At the spot where the Rodriguez SUV had gone over the edge, I slowed, half expecting to see something, a ghostly figure perhaps, or an old woman in black. But the road was empty. I continued driving, both relieved and strangely disappointed. Perhaps it was truly over. Perhaps the Rodriguez family had found peace, and La Segadora had moved on to guide other lost souls. Then, as I rounded a curve, my headlights illuminated a scene that made me slam on the brakes. An SUV was pulled over at the side of the road, its hazard lights blinking. A man stood beside it, waving desperately at my approaching truck. Behind him, I could see a woman and 2 children inside the vehicle. I stopped, my heart pounding. Not again. This couldn't be happening again. But as I looked closer, I realized these weren't the Rodriguez family. This was a real family, a living family with a broken-down vehicle on a dangerous road. I hesitated, remembering La Segadora's warning from a year ago. If I helped them, would I be marked again? Was this another test? Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. Standing a short distance behind the stranded SUV was a familiar figure, an elderly woman in a long black dress. La Segadora. She was watching, waiting, but this time she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the man with the SUV at his family. Understanding dawned. She wasn't here for me. She was here for them. I quickly pulled over, grabbed my flashlight, and jumped out of the truck. "Senor," I called, "get your family away from the car now." The man looked confused. "What? We just have a flat tire. Can you help us?" "Trust me," I insisted, walking closer. "Get your family out and into my truck. This isn't a safe place." As I approached, I saw La Segadora more clearly. She raised one bony hand pointing not at the family, but up the road. I turned to look where she was pointing and saw headlights approaching at high speed, another vehicle taking the curve too fast. "Move!" I shouted, lunging forward and grabbing the man's arm, pulling him away from his SUV. The speeding vehicle, a large truck, swerved around the curve, lost control, and slammed into the parked SUV, crushing it against the mountain wall, exactly where the man had been standing seconds before. The impact was tremendous, metal screeching against metal, glass shattering. The woman in the SUV screamed, the children crying. I rushed to the passenger side, helping the woman and children out, while the stunned husband stood watching his vehicle being crushed. "Are you okay? Is anyone hurt?" I asked frantically. The woman nodded shakily, clutching her children. We're okay, just scared." I guided them to my truck, glancing back at La Segadora. She stood watching, her black eyes unreadable. Then she slowly nodded to me, turned, and vanished. The driver of the truck that had hit them was dazed but not seriously injured. I called the police on my radio, reporting the accident. As we waited for help to arrive, the man whose family I had saved approached me. "How did you know?" he asked, his voice low so his family couldn't hear. "How did you know that truck was coming? You pulled me away before we could have seen it." I looked at him, then at his wife and children, thinking of another family who hadn't been so fortunate. "Let's just say I've learned to recognize warnings," I replied. "Some things you can't explain. You just have to trust your instincts." He studied me for a moment, then extended his hand. "Gracias. You saved my life, my family's lives." I shook his hand, feeling a strange sense of completion, as if a circle had closed. When the police and ambulance arrived, I gave my statement and prepared to continue my journey. As I climbed back into my truck, I noticed something on the passenger seat that hadn't been there before. A small white flower, a marigold, a traditional flower of Dia de los Muertos. I picked it up, twirling it between my fingers, and smiled. "De nada, Elena," I whispered, placing the flower carefully on my dashboard. I started the engine and continued down La Rumorosa, feeling not fear, but a quiet acceptance. I understood now that death was not an enemy to be fought, but a natural part of life's journey. La Segadora was not a monster, but a guide leading souls to their final destination, and sometimes giving the living a chance to change fate's course. As for the Rodriguez family, I hoped they had found peace. Their debt had been paid, the truth revealed. Vega would spend the rest of his life in prison, his victims finally avenged. And me, I had been marked by death, and then unmarked, forever changed by my journey between worlds. I would continue driving Mexico's highways, more aware now of the thin veil between life and death, between this world and the next. For those who have looked death in the eye and lived to tell the tale, the world is never quite the same again. The shadows hold different meanings, the whispers carry different messages, and the roads, especially La Rumorosa, tell different stories. But that's another tale for another time. For now I drive on, watching both the road ahead and the rear-view mirror, never knowing what or who might appear in either. 2 weeks later, I received a letter at home. No return address, just my name and address in elegant, old-fashioned handwriting. Inside was a newspaper clipping about Vega's sentencing, and a faded photograph I didn't recognize at first. Upon closer inspection, I realized it was a much older picture of the Rodriguez family, Carlos and Ana, on their wedding day, their children not yet born. On the back, in the same handwriting as the envelope, were the words, "Debts paid, souls freed, remember us." I never discovered who sent it. The postmark was from a small town near La Rumorosa, a place known for its Day of the Dead celebrations. I added the photograph to our family altar, which we now maintained year-round. Marisol never questioned it, accepting these strangers as part of our extended family of souls. Sometimes on quiet nights when the house is still, I think I hear children's laughter, distant and ethereal. And sometimes, when our little Elena plays alone, I overhear her talking to someone named Diego. Children, my abuela always said, can see what adults have forgotten to look for. The innocent can peer through the veil that separates worlds. Perhaps that's why Elena Rodriguez could see La Segadora while her parents could not. Perhaps that's why she knew they were dead before they did. Or perhaps, in the end, we see what we need to see when we need to see it. As for La Segadora, I've caught glimpses of her occasionally, a black silhouette at accident scenes, a shadow beside hospital beds, a figure standing at crossroads where life's paths diverge. She no longer frightens me. We have an understanding now, the harvester and I. She does her job guiding souls to their next journey, and I do mine remembering those who have passed and helping those still here. For what is life but a journey toward death, and what is death but a doorway to whatever lies beyond the debt of truth, the debt of memory, the debt we all must pay sooner or later? I drive the highways of Mexico with open eyes now, seeing not just the road before me, but the stories etched into every cross, every shrine, every curve where someone's journey ended too soon. And when I pass La Rumorosa, I always slow down, not from fear, but from respect. I nod to the mountain, to the spirits who may still linger there, to La Segadora, who may be watching. For some roads carry more than just travelers. They carry memories, secrets, and sometimes souls searching for their way home. And La Rumorosa, the whisperer, will always have new stories to tell for those willing to listen. But remember this, if you ever find yourself driving those treacherous curves on a foggy night, if you see a family stranded on the roadside, think carefully before stopping. Not because you shouldn't help, sometimes you must, but because once you step between the living and the dead, you can never truly go back to who you were before. You become like me, a traveler between worlds, forever marked by what you've seen, what you've learned, and who you've helped cross over. And if you see an old woman in a black dress standing by the roadside, don't be afraid. Listen to what she has to tell you. Her warnings may seem cruel, but they carry wisdom older than the mountains themselves. For La Segadora doesn't cause death, she simply witnesses. It guides, it ensures that souls find their proper path, as we all must eventually. But until then, we drive on under stars that might be souls, alongside shadows that might be memories, guided by whispers that might be warnings, or might just be the wind. In Mexico, we know better than to be certain either way. Part 4, the aftermath. 1 year had passed since the night I confronted Vega, since the Rodriguez family found peace. I thought the story had ended, that I was free from death's mark. I was wrong. The day began like any other. I woke beside Marisol, kissed her growing belly. Our 4th child would arrive in 2 months, and prepared for another day hauling freight. It was an ordinary Thursday in October, the air crisp with autumn. Dia de los Muertos approaching once again. "Be careful today," Marisol said as I headed for the door, her voice tinged with that familiar worry. "Will you be home for dinner?" "Of course," I promised, kissing her forehead. "Just a routine delivery to Tijuana. I'll be back before sunset." I had avoided La Rumorosa for a year, taking longer routes when possible. But today my dispatcher insisted a time-sensitive delivery couldn't wait for the detour. The bonus pay would help with the baby's expenses. The drive up was uneventful, sunlight gleaming off the barren mountains. La Rumorosa seemed almost peaceful in daylight, its deadly curves clearly visible. I made my delivery in Tijuana by noon, grabbed lunch, and started the return journey. I planned to cross La Rumorosa before sunset, but a traffic accident delayed me for hours. By the time I approached the mountain pass, darkness had fallen. The date on my dashboard display read October 30th. Exactly 1 year since I had helped the Rodriguez family. Exactly 4 years since they died. The radio crackled as I began the descent. Static, then silence. I checked my cell phone, no signal. Just me and the mountain alone in the growing darkness. I gripped the wheel tighter, alert for any sign of ghostly figures or black-dressed women. But the road remained empty the night still, except for the rumble of my engine. Then around the curve where the Rodriguez SUV had plunged to its death, my headlights illuminated something on the roadside. A small wooden cross adorned with fresh marigolds. Someone had created a shrine. I slowed, curious. I'd passed this spot dozens of times, but never noticed a shrine before. I pulled over, grabbed my flashlight, and approached the makeshift memorial. Beside the marigolds sat 4 small clay figurines, a man, a woman, and 2 children, the Rodriguez family. A handwritten note was tucked beneath them. Para los que ayudaron a pagar la deuda. For those who helped pay the debt. A chill ran through me despite the mild night. Who had placed this here Cardenas, perhaps Ramirez, or someone else entirely? As I knelt to examine it closer, I noticed something I'd overlooked, a 5th figurine partially hidden behind the others. A truck driver standing with 1 foot in this world and 1 in the next. My blood turned to ice. The figurine wore my uniform, had my build. It was me. A sudden gust of wind extinguished the candles at the shrine, plunging me into darkness, except for my flashlight beam. And in that darkness I heard it, the soft sound of footsteps approaching behind me. I spun around the beam of light cutting through the night. La Segadora stood before me, her ancient eyes reflecting my light like bottomless wells. But this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood Carlos Rodriguez, his expression solemn. "You've returned," I whispered, finding my voice. "Why, I thought your debt was paid. I thought you were free." "Our debt is paid," Carlos replied, his voice carrying on the wind. "But yours has just begun. Mine, I don't understand." La Segadora stepped forward, raising 1 bony hand toward me. In it she held what looked like an old-fashioned ledger, its pages yellowed with age. She opened it to a page where my name was written in flowing script. "What is this?" I asked, though I already sensed the answer. "The balance of life and death," Carlos explained. "When you interfered with our passing, you took our place in death's ledger. La Segadora marked you." "But I helped you find peace," I protested. "I exposed Vega. The mark was lifted." "The mark was postponed," Carlos corrected. "Not lifted. One cannot cheat death, Miguel. One can only negotiate terms." La Segadora nodded slowly, her black eyes never leaving mine. "So I'm going to die?" I asked, fear gripping my heart. "Here tonight. What about my family?" "My unborn child." Carlos's expression softened. "Not tonight, not here. La Segadora grants you time until your child is born, until it can survive without you. But then you must return to La Rumorosa. And if I refuse, then the debt falls to another," he said quietly. "Perhaps your wife, perhaps one of your children." My legs weakened beneath me. "This can't be happening. This isn't fair." "Death isn't about fairness," Carlos said. "It's about balance. For every soul saved, another must take its place. The family I saved last month," I suddenly realized. "On this same road. Was that part of this?" La Segadora nodded again, a slight movement in the darkness. "You were given a choice," Carlos explained. "Save them and accept your fate, or let them die and free yourself. You chose to save them." I thought of the family, the father, mother, their 2 young children, so similar to the Rodriguez family, so similar to my own. "I would make the same choice again," I said firmly. "We know," Carlos replied with a sad smile. "That's why you were chosen in the first place." La Segadora closed her ledger and extended her other hand toward me. In it was a small object, a silver crucifix like the one the gas station attendant had given me a year ago. "What am I supposed to do with this?" I asked. "Wear it," Carlos said. "It will protect your family after you're gone. And when the time comes, it will guide you back here." I took the crucifix, its metal ice cold against my palm. "How much time do I have?" "Until the first full moon after your child is born," Carlos answered. "Then you must return to La Rumorosa at midnight. And if I don't, she will come for you," he said simply, "and for those you love." With those words, both Carlos and La Segadora began to fade, becoming transparent in the beam of my flashlight. "Wait," I called. "Is there no other way?" But they were gone, leaving me alone with the shrine and the crucifix in my hand. I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling with what I had learned. Death had postponed my marking, not canceled it. I had months, not years, to live. Marisol was waiting when I arrived, her face lighting up as I entered our home. I embraced her, feeling the swell of her belly between us, our unborn child moving against my touch. "You're trembling," she said, pulling back to look at me. "What's wrong? Did something happen?" I almost told her everything then, about the shrine, about La Segadora and Carlos, about the debt I owed. But the words died in my throat. How could I burden her with this knowledge, especially now? "Just tired," I lied, forcing a smile. It was a long drive. That night I lay awake beside Marisol, watching the rise and fall of her chest as she slept. Our 3 children slept peacefully in their rooms down the hall. Our 4th would arrive in December. The first full moon after that would be in January. I had 3 months left to live. In the days that followed, I began preparing quietly. I updated my life insurance, made sure our mortgage had death benefits, created college funds for the children. I wrote letters to each of them to be opened after I was gone. I took videos of myself giving advice, telling stories, saying the things I wouldn't be able to say in person. I spent every moment I could with my family, memorizing the sound of my children's laughter, the feel of Marisol's hand in mine, the small daily miracles I'd once taken for granted. Ramirez noticed the change in me when we met for coffee one day. "You look like a man preparing for a journey," he observed. I smiled faintly. "Something like that?" He studied me for a long moment. "The Rodriguez family. You've seen them again, haven't you?" I nodded, unable to lie to him. "Not just them. La Segadora, too." Ramirez made the sign of the cross. "What did they want?" "To collect a debt," I said simply. Understanding dawned in his eyes. "Miguel, no. There must be another way." "If there is, I haven't found it," I admitted. "And I've looked everywhere, spoken to priests, curanderos, even a bruja in Mexicali. They all say the same thing: death's ledger must be balanced." "I could come with you," Ramirez offered. "When the time comes." I shook my head. This is my journey to make alone. Our daughter was born on December 12th, healthy, beautiful, with Marisol's eyes and my smile. We named her Esperanza Hope. As I held her for the first time, smelled her newborn scent, counted her tiny fingers and toes, I felt both boundless joy and crushing sadness. I would not see her grow up. I would not teach her to ride a bike, help with her homework, intimidate her first date, but she would live. My family would live. That knowledge gave me strength. The January full moon arrived with cold clarity. I told Marisol I had a night delivery, kissed her and the children goodbye, and drove toward La Rumorosa one last time. The mountain pass was deserted at midnight, bathed in silver moonlight. I parked at the spot where the shrine stood and stepped out into the chill air. La Segadora waited for me, her black dress rippling though there was no wind. Behind her stood the Rodriguez family, Carlos, Ana Diego, and Elena. But they were different now, their forms more substantial, their expressions peaceful. They had found their rest. "You came," Elena said, smiling at me. "We were worried you wouldn't." "I made a promise," I replied. La Segadora approached, her ledger open in her hands. She pointed to my name, then to a blank space beside it. "What happens now?" I asked. "You join us," Carlos said. "Not as a trapped soul, but as a guide, like us. A guide. For others who will come to this road," Ana explained. "Those who need warning, those who need guidance." "So I'll be like La Segadora?" I asked. "No," Diego spoke for the first time. "She harvests, we guide, we prepare, we warn." La Segadora nodded, closing her ledger. I took a deep breath, feeling strangely calm. "Will I see my family again?" "On Dia de los Muertos," Elena said. "When the veil is thinnest, if they remember you." "They'll remember," I said with certainty. I removed the silver crucifix from my neck, kissed it, and placed it on the shrine beside the figurines. My last connection to the physical world. "I'm ready," I said. La Segadora extended her hand. I reached out and took it, feeling neither cold nor warmth, neither fear nor regret. Just acceptance. The world around me shifted, colors, fading sounds, dulling, until all that remained was La Rumorosa itself, eternal and unchanging. I could see every curve, every cross, marking a death, every soul still lingering. And I could see a truck approaching its headlights, cutting through the fog, its driver unaware of the thin ice on the upcoming curve. "We should warn him," I said, understanding my new purpose. La Segadora nodded, and together we moved toward the roadside, ready to appear in the driver's headlights. An old woman in black and a truck driver with knowing eyes, for La Rumorosa will always claim its victims. But now some will heed the warning and live. Others will ignore it and die. And a few, a very few, will make the choice I made, to pay the debt willingly to take another's place in death's ledger. There's a reason Mexican truck drivers never stop to help stranded motorists on La Rumorosa during the Night of the Dead. But if you find yourself driving that treacherous road and see a man in a trucker's uniform standing beside an old woman in black, remember my story. Sometimes the warning is a gift. Sometimes the debt is worth paying. And sometimes death is not the end of the journey, but merely a change of direction.